Fantasyland is the land within the Magic Kingdom that celebrates the great classic fairy tales of all time and also the Walt Disney films that feature those very same stories. The idea of the castle at the end of Main Street, of course, was pioneered by Walt Disney back in the 50s for the first Disneyland, and that sequence seems to have worked greatly. It's made its way through 4 Magic Kingdoms now. The castle is obviously designed to be very inspirational, and we wanted the one in Europe, of course, to really stand out. We didn't want to just duplicate one of the existing castles. We wanted to make sure that this one was the best. The main goal was to create a castle that looked like it just popped out of a storybook. And so what we simultaneously did was to go through the Disney films and also legitimate classic stories and fairy tales and search for pictures of wonderful, magnificent Disney-esque castles. And then finally, I would say the final piece, or the main inspirational element for the castle, was Mont Saint-Michel. And we took that grand silhouette of Mont Saint-Michel and then infilled and backed away from that and started to detail from some of our storybook castles. The story is told upstairs in the castle. We used tapestries from the famous Aubusson tapestry maker in the south of France. There's a stained glass window that changes, and it tells the story of the gifts of Sleeping Beauty. When Sleeping Beauty was born, she was bestowed gifts by the good fairies, and one of them bestowed upon her the gift of song, and that gift of song was represented by a dove, and the other bestowed the gift of beauty, and that's represented by the rose. So as you look at the stained glass window, it changes from a rose pattern to a dove pattern right before your eyes. Well, one of the things that's different with the castle at Disneyland Paris is the dragon, which lives downstairs in the basement. Sometimes he's asleep, and sometimes he wakes up, and sometimes he has a temper tantrum. That was something that we are very proud of, and we think is a great thing that distinguishes the Disneyland Paris castle from other parks. The Auberge Cendrillon is a table service restaurant that was really inspired by some of our own dinners in auberges throughout France. Those are some of course, the best meals that you'll ever have in your life. And we thought, gosh, we've got to have one of those somewhere at Disneyland Paris. The logical location for it was Fantasyland next to the castle. We thought it'd be fun to theme it to Cinderella, to the manor house that she lived in, and to include ornamentation that was representative of the characters, of the mice and the birds and the pumpkin coach. The Carousel, we thought, let's make all of the horses on the outer row, that's 18 horses, let's make all of them armored. And that ought to look incredible as it spins around. Those were specially made horses that were done by an artist in Ohio. The other horses were made in our shops at Walt Disney World. We used a high degree of gold leaf and silver leaf and copper leaf. It is really just a work of art. The Chariots were taken off of the Walt Disney World device when that was purchased back in the 60s, and they've been in storage for many, many years. And several years ago, the Smithsonian Institute made some inquiries, and they were interested in getting those from us. They're magnificent, beautiful, beautiful chariots. The dark rides are very similar to the rides that we've previously developed. We increased the capacity of the dark rides by 50% on Snow White, Pinocchio, and on Peter Pan. We lengthened the boat on Peter Pan, for example, and on the little ride vehicles for Snow White and Pinocchio, we added another bench row of seating. So that way, these 3-minute, 4-minute attractions can be enjoyed by a larger number of people during the day. We did add a happy ending to the Snow White adventure due to popular demand. The demand for Dumbo is really high. Almost every kid who comes into Disneyland or one of our parks wants to ride on Dumbo. So we, like the other attractions, increased the capacity of Dumbo. We added 6 arms to what was a 10-arm arrangement. So now we were able to get 60% more people on per hour. The most significant new attraction would be the Hedge Maze attraction, which is taken from the film Alice in Wonderland. And this is our first hedge maze. We had never designed a hedge maze before. Usually they take about 30 or 40 years to grow, and we had to figure out quickly how to do one in about 2 or 3 years. And we did. We actually grew the plant material in Normandy in the exact layout that it was to be laid out in the park. It was about 60 kilometers away from the park, and then transplanted it onto the site when the time came, during the construction phase. We have this wonderful hedge maze themed to Alice in Wonderland. Across from that is the teacup attraction, also from Alice in Wonderland. The teacups we had to enclose because of the weather. And we were concerned that that cover would create too dark of an experience. So we decided that let's make that cover out of glass, and let's try to make it look like it fits into the area by making it look like a big flower, a big upside-down lily, if you will. We also have the big oversized leaves from Alice in Wonderland. The final element that makes that whole story come to life for the guest is the March Hare snack stand, where you can buy unbirthday cake, just like Alice was privy to during the Mad Hatter scene from the film. So this is where food, merchandise, attractions, landscaping, music, it all comes together in areas just like that. Shops are a lot of fun. Shops, we decided to let's have one great special effect or one great animated prop or something that the guest remembers when they leave that shop. So in the candy store, with the 3 fairies from Sleeping Beauty making candy. In the Snow White shop, we have reenacted or rebuilt the actual cottage of the 7 dwarfs. In the Sir Mickey shop, we have a beanstalk that's gone out of control. And if you look carefully through one of the windows, you see the giant from the beanstalk story looking in and peering in at you. In the Geppetto shop, we recreated the workshop of Geppetto. So we really, at every moment, really wanted to drive home that these aren't merely shops that we sprinkled lightly some theming on. They are the real places where these people really live. It's magic. The holiday shop in the castle was inspired heavily by the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and really has a wonderful Gothic flavor to it, and very colorful. Oh, and there's a wonderful Merlin shop. All of the things that Merlin would be tinkering and toying with are on display, and it's conveyed in such a fashion that you really believe that Merlin is there and might walk down the stairs at any moment. For the first time in 40 years, we built a Storybook Land. Storybook Land was part of the opening day menu at Disneyland in Anaheim. One thing that we had to think about, though, was at Disneyland there is an onboard narrator that tells you in a very intimate fashion about what you're seeing as you go along the course of the ride. And at Disneyland Paris, we have an issue with many different languages in the park at one time. We have at least 5 major languages at any given time. So we opted to tell the story with music rather than with a narrative. On Casey Jr., that presented some challenges. We hadn't built a Casey Jr. since 1955 either, and I think times dictated that we did something a little bit more thrilling with it. So this one is what's called a powered coaster. It's a roller coaster powered electrically, and is capable of variable speed and capable of gaining speed and slowing down rapidly. It doesn't require gravity as the momentum for the attraction. One interesting thing that we did with it was we used it as a test device for what we call synchronized onboard audio, which we later used at Space Mountain at Disneyland Paris and Space Mountain here at California. Another unique aspect is the old Mill Windmill, which is the only one in existence at any of our parks. I think the uniqueness of it and the sentimental value of it is the fact that Walt Disney originally intended to build this attraction at Disneyland in 1955. And finally we have It's a Small World, which is one of the most popular attractions ever created for Disney parks, and has been entertaining audiences since the 1964 World's Fair in New York. It then moved to Disneyland in 1966, and then we built 3 more after that for the various Disney parks. It is in spirit the same. Technically, we made some changes with it to make it a little more up to date. We added North America for the first time to It's a Small World. So this is the first time that you actually see the United States represented. The colors, I would say, are richer, more intense. The lighting is certainly more intense and more colorful. And we re-recorded the music. We used the London Philharmonic in England to re-record it, and we brought in authentic bands from those very countries to do the country-specific scenes. So one brand new area of Fantasyland is what we call the Italian section, where we have the Pizzeria, Notte, and the Fantasia, Gelati. The Pizzeria Notte is a fantastic restaurant that I really love. We have grapevines hanging, from the rafters, and Chianti bottles, and columns swaying left and right, and nothing is straight, and everything is crooked. And it really is a lot of fun. We even have a broken tile patio, and some of those tiles that are in that patio, if you look really carefully, you can see some tiles that used to be at Disneyland that we preserved and then incorporated into this broken tile wall. So we have a little bit of Disneyland in there too. Another unique element is the more natural element of the meandering landscape and a canal that winds its way through the center of the land. The landscaping approach was to use a heavy degree of the topiary plants and the fantastically shaped plants, a high degree of curvilinear lines. We didn't want this to be very formal. We wanted it to be very dreamlike and free-flowing. And the area where the teacups is, in some ways, forms the apex or forms the center of all of these meandering lines. I would say that was our biggest challenge overall with Fantasyland, was not just to replicate a European village, because that would not be extraordinary for the audience that was visiting the land or for visiting the park. We wanted to create something that was familiar, but also had the essence of Disney and very fairy tale-like. The shingles on the buildings are more colorful than shingles that you would see in other villages. The trees have wonderful, exotic, fanciful shapes to them. The lampposts may integrate a higher degree of colored glass, even things like finials. So everything is slightly out of this world. You've gone to another world, or you just haven't gone to another village. You've gone to an extraordinary world of your dreams. And Disney plays a big part of that. So that's carried through everything. That's carried through not just the buildings, but the park benches, the lampposts, the waste baskets, the mailboxes. Everything reinforces that particular setting. All the details come together and are more fantastic in this conglomeration than any village that you could find elsewhere in Europe. I'm very happy with how Fantasyland came out. It's wonderful just to walk around and look at all the details, the color, the music, the motion, the kinetics of the whole land is wonderful. I think the best barometer of that, though, is the expression of the guests, to see the little kids' expressions as they discover things, to see the expressions of the adults or of their parents or of anyone walking through. And that's always the greatest thing, is when you see people noticing and paying attention to some of the smallest details and enjoying those details.